Okay, what is up, everybody? What is up? How's it going? I know, surprise Sunday stream. Um, Hope everyone's having a lovely Sunday. I just came across some information that is kind of startling, and first and foremost, want to make this abundantly fucking clear. Want to make this abundantly fucking clear. I am, for one, not saying revsaysdesu is a white supremacist and a neo-Nazi or a pedophile. I am not saying that. I am not saying this video is not to say and to slander this man's person. It is purely a live stream, a video that is a critique on the analysis of the phrase Christ is King. Okay? Now, I want to make it also abundantly clear. I am not saying you cannot, under no circumstances, say Christ is King, nor am I saying Christ is King is purely anti-Semitic. Any person who is saying that is clearly trying to discredit. What I am saying is that the phrase has a political history as well as an ahistorical history where there is a truth behind it, but at the same time, there's also nefarious people behind the phrase. The phrase Christ is King is the same as Black Lives Matter. You know, when someone attacks the phrase Black Lives Matter, it makes the person appear to be racist. That's why we're all in this political division of going against a political narrative makes you an evil person. But in reality, the people behind that phrase, not entirely, it's these people. The people jump onto the phrase thinking that they're doing a natural good thing, when in actuality, they're being taught through critical race theory or Marxist praxis to adopt racist beliefs, such as in terms of Black Lives Matter. If you actually go to their webpage, it says literally on their webpage, especially a lot of people like to bring up, Summer Love 2020 and all this stuff, that it wants to end the nuclear family. It wants to abolish men out of the family. It's anti-capitalist, and they do have the same rhetoric of anti-capitalism, anti-Jew. Jews need to be completely genocided and destroyed. Just like the phrase Christ is King, where you do have a person of the name of Nick Fuentes, who is clearly a white supremacist, despite the fact that he's a gay Mexican. I know it's a very big contradiction, but he honestly believes he is a pure Aryan. And that he uses the phrase as a rallying cry of white collectivism to garner those, to ban within the group, and anyone who's against the group is against quote unquote Christian values. Not real Christian values, but unquote unquote Christian values, or against National Socialism, or against Christian nationalism, which is just basically National Socialism of white ethno-state. And that is what Nick Fuentes is. I don't think saying Christ is King is a Western purity culture. That's not what I said. That's not what I said. Jay, I'm not saying Christ is King is a Western purity culture. I'm saying there are two different sects, just like Black Lives Matter, behind the phrase, where one is an actual Christian and the other is not an actual Christian. They're just using they're subverting the religion to appropriate it and to change the you're referring to the sweets. Okay. They're just appropriating the religion, just like how the left, in terms of Marxism, is appropriating social issues to execute Marxist praxis within the thing that they're appropriating. It's like a disease that cannot convince itself to say, hey, let me enter your body because I'm here to kill you, and I'm going to slowly kill you, and as you're dying, it's going to be very painful and very agonizing. No one's going to want to eat that. So instead of the disease coming up in front of you and saying, like, let me in, the disease slips into a skin suit of something that you're very familiar, right? That you're very familiar with, and it's saying, hey, I'm this Christian and I need you to swallow bits and pieces of Christian, which is in me, but I'm not a Christian because I'm a virus, because I'm all about death and virus and genocide. I need you to take my interpretation of what Christianity is into your body, and you will truly be saved and you will truly be whole. And they start eating it thinking that they're absorbing Christian values, when in actuality they're not absorbing Christian values. They're absorbing a disease that's putting them into a position where they'll never, under no circumstances, look at themselves and say, the reason why I'm in this position where I can't provide for my family, I can't get a girlfriend, or things are not going my way, isn't because it's something that I did internally that I'm not figuring out myself and being a real man. It's the Jews that are the real problem of the issue of why I can't find a girlfriend, and that all the white women are over there, or all the white women want to have sex with black men or people that aren't white. And it's a way to prevent people from being able to self-reflect and actually be able to self-analyze themselves and say, actually, no, it is my fault. And it prevents self-improvement. And I'm going to keep saying this again over and over because I don't want Rev thinking that I'm calling him a neo-Nazi and a white supremacist pedophile and all that stuff. But what I am saying is, you definitely do not, under no circumstances, after all these years that you've been fighting off these accusations of you being a racist and a pedophile, want to connect yourself to this phrase, Christ is King, to a man who literally has a history of arguing that the age of consent needs, and to prove that Nick actually coined this, here's a fucking video of him talking that he coined the fucking phrase.
Groypers thing for a while. Now, Republican politics, but I will say that I was one of the first people in a political context on the right wing to start saying Christ is King. That was kind of the Groypers thing for a while. Now, Republican politicians and conservatives would talk about God a lot, and they would talk about Judeo-Christianity. We were the first really explicitly Catholic, really intense, far-right group to say Christ is King. And what's interesting about that phrase is...
Now, this is him admitting the way he uses the phrase in terms of a political sense is a far-right extremist rallying cry. He is literally admitting this.
Unlike one nation under God, not everybody can and not everybody will say it. And it's interesting. When you go to some kind of conservative, Republican, liberal, Democratic event, and they say one nation under God, everybody can put their hand over their heart and say that. And when they say, may God protect our troops, everybody can say that. But if you go to a political rally and everyone's chanting, Christ is King, if you look around the room...
He's clearly making a distinction that there is a difference between real Christians who say under God, real Christians as God protect our nation, versus him saying Christ is King is not a Christian saying. It is a far right political subversive movement. It is a political rallying cry of white collectivism, that the whites must band together as a proletariat to go against the rich bourgeois that is the Jew of capitalism, because the Jew values the money more than God, that they must be destroyed and killed and genocided, and that their wealth needs to be centralized into a state to where that wealth can then be evenly redistributed amongst the proletariat to enter into a pure white, stateless, cashless society where you have all your needs based on the state filling out those needs. And he's clearly making that distinction. He's saying we're not them. When we say Christ is King, we're not saying those who say under God and they can put their hand on their heart and say under God. He's clearly making that distinction. Okay? So no one can say, well, that's not what it means. No. He clearly is saying there is a distinction between the two. To give Rev the benefit of the doubt, I don't think he knows who Nick Fuentes is. Yeah, that's what I'm saying. That's what I'm saying. And I'm constantly going to keep repeating this. Rev, I am not saying you're a neo-Nazi. I am not saying you're a white supremacist. I am not saying you're a pedophile. What I am saying is that that phrase, Christ is King, is really, really, really heavily bloated with a history of arguing for lowering and abolishing the age of consent. It is about a history of saying that whites deserve to be on top and that everybody else deserves to be on the bottom. It is a history of literally quite changing the cultural space of what we all like gaming and anime and other subcultures, to morph it into a way where it's no longer recognizable and it doesn't have its cultural identity, and it upholds a more national socialism or national socialist or Christian nationalist type of worldview, where it upholds their worldview so long as the main character is blonde hair, blue-eyed, and they get the girl, and the girl is in no way, shape, or form, despite the fact it's a fantasy, showing some way of competence. And I'm not talking about in terms of girl boss, I'm talking about in terms of well-written female characters that aren't girl bosses. They're competent, but at the same time still hold their feminine traits to where they actually have a romantic crush with the main character. It's a political subversion. He is clearly saying he is a political subversion. That the phrase Christ is King is mainly political subversion. And people need to understand, you need to be clear on what you are saying if you saying that phrase. I'm not saying don't say Christ is King. I'm not saying that. But what I am saying is be careful how you navigate with that phrase, because one slip up means all those years of you saying you're not a neo-Nazi, you're not a white supremacist, you're not a pedophile, immediately gets tarnished and it gets thrown out by just 3 simple words. And I'm going to show you a clip of Nick Fuentes. Again, this is actually, hold on, we're going to finish this real quick too.
You may notice not everybody is saying the chant. Not everybody can. And by nature, it is exclusionary. Because unlike a vague appeal to God, not everybody can say it. That's because not everybody believes it. And saying it is a way to quickly identify who's really with us, who actually has a faith that is strong and alive. Not every Christian wakes up every day and says, Christ is King. Some liberal Christians wake up and say, we should tolerate everybody and everything's fine. So even some Catholics say that. But for a Catholic to wake up every day and say, Christ is King. Christ is your King. He's my King. He's the King. It's Christ himself. It is not just some vague God. It's a particular one. That's a very quick way to identify who's with us, who's a part of the body of the church, who's a part of the body of Christ, and who's outside of it for one reason or another. And Christ is King is something that actually Jewish people cannot participate in. And if we're to say that the country should be run by Christians, that's also something that Jews actually can't participate in.
So here he is. His version of Christ and King is King. His version of Christianity is the same exclusionary tactic of DEI. We accept everyone except for these people who we deem as unacceptable, evil, and can no longer under no circumstances join our movement, despite the fact that we say we're inclusive. He's doing the exact same thing. Only those who appropriate our beliefs are, well, everyone is inclusive, but we're going to exclude you if you do not hold the gnosis of what we believe is going to save the country, the gnosis, the knowledge that only I possess, that can only save not only the country, but save everybody. But at the same time, we're not going to reference the Bible. We're just going to reference the state as God. I also think that Rev also didn't make that tweet in political context. Yeah, that is true. That is true. Like, again, I'm going to keep reiterating. I'm not saying Rev is a neo-Nazi. I'm not saying that he's a white supremacist. I'm not saying he's a pedophile. But you really do need to be fucking careful with that, Rev, because now you have something on you that the second you tilt one way, that's it, bro. You say the wrong thing that goes into his view of Christianity as opposed to Christianity that is purely from the Bible. That's it. Like, say for instance, in terms of his worldview of Christianity, right? Despite the fact that it says in the Bible that Christians and Jews are allies, and despite the fact that in the Quran states that Christians and Jews are alike and they need to be treated as the same. That they need to be treated as the same. He's against being an ally of the Jew. So he's rejecting ahistorically, he is rejecting a historical fact that a Christian is an ally to a Jew and a Jew is an ally to a Christian. So if you're going, like, my requirement would be, what is your, and I'm talking to Rev, what would be your position in terms of Judaism? Do you support Zionism, or are you against Zionism? And that would ultimately determine whether or not that you are what you say that you clearly are, or you're using Christianity as a mask or a subversion. Now, in terms of calling Nick Fuentes a pedophile, I think it's fair to call him a fucking pedophile, because here's a clip that Apostate Prophet and David Wood found. And these are two people, and a lot of people are going to say, well, these guys are left-wing, so therefore you should not pay attention to them. That's not them. To be honest, these guys actually know a lot. And I'm not entirely sure if they're like left-wing or anything. I'm going to put them in more like a central position at this point. But like, here's a clip of them finding Nick Fuentes saying something very weird about the age of consent. And I want you to understand something, Rev, of what that phrase really means when it comes to Christ is King and what it's packed within that phrase.
Every Dawa clan out there, but yeah, so that's Daniel Hakikachu,
Exactly.
Sneeko, all these guys.
Daniel Hakikachu immediately. Same launch, same approach.
Because what are we really talking about here? Why are people so upset if somebody is 17 rather than 18? Well, that's because in the state of Florida, the age of consent is 18. It just so happens that the age of consent in Illinois.
Oh wait, hold on. Wait, let me go back because
Now look at but if it's happening to me, then it's bad. Now take a look at my basement. I got a nice green screen.
A feminist social concept.
Wait.
I don't wait. Yeah, he's saying the whole age of consent thing is really a feminist social construct. He's using Marxist praxis in his ability to deconstruct the age of consent to say that age of consent should not be a thing, or it should be lowered.
I got a nice green screen.
A feminist social concept.
Wait.
Hey, too, the whole age of consent thing is really a feminist social construct. I'll just put that out there.
Wait, who does this remind you of?
It reminds me of a lot of Marxists
Dawa clan out there,
and a lot of Islamists.
Yeah, so that's Daniel Hakikachu.
Exactly.
And Daniel Hakikachu, for a lot of people who don't know, if you haven't been following the whole, Islam is conquering the West type of thing that's been going on for quite some time. Daniel Hakikachu is a Islamic philosopher who has debated with IP, not this guy, but they're friends with IP, has debated with IP about why it is perfectly fine for a person who is under the tenets of Islam, who believes in Allah, to have sex with a 5-month-old child so long as there's signs of maturity, quote unquote, that allows you to be able to have sex with the child. Now, what do they mean by maturity? In terms of Daniel Hakikachu, when he says maturity, people in the West, when they hear maturity, they think 18 plus, like the brain's developed, the body's fully developed. They've been through K through 12. They got some semblance of how the world works and they can actually be on their own. and they can make their own decisions, and they're able to give consent, their own consent without parental supervision. When he says maturity in terms of the Middle East perspective, they mean so long as the child is fat enough to not be crushed by your penis entering a little girl's body. I want you to understand, Rev, what that phrase is loaded with. It is loaded with a lot of shit behind it. And you really do need to understand, you really do need to differentiate being a real Christian versus a Christian subversionist.
Nico, all these guys.
Down like Pikachu immediately. Same launch, same approach.
Because what are we really talking about here? Why are people so upset if somebody is 17 rather than 18? Well, that's because in the state of Florida, the age of consent is 18. It just so happens that the age of consent in Illinois is 17, and in other states, it's 16. And it varies from country to country and state to state. But if the age of consent is 18 in Florida, then it is the worst thing possible that you're, dating somebody that's a year younger, right? End of the world.
First of all, no one thinks that. Like, who thinks the worst thing that could ever possibly happen is that an 18-year-old had sex with a 17-year-old in Florida? Who's running around saying that? It's just no, it's actually a crime there because they have a legal marker that this is the age of consent. No one's running around, oh, it's the worst thing in the world. You're basically a pedophile if she's 17 years old. And
because every state can form their own laws.
364 days, it's the end of the world. No one is saying that. They're just saying it's a crime there because different states have different laws. No one's running around freaking out about it except people who are trying to lower the age of consent because they actually want to lower it down to like 5, like Daniel Hakikachu does.
Yeah.
Well, he doesn't want any age limit.
That's true.
Say that, let's think about what's really going on here. Age of consent means the age at which an adult can consent. Do we really believe that you have to be 18 years old in order to consent to sex? Otherwise, it's rape? Are we really supposed to believe that people, adults, grown adults who are past the point of puberty engage in a relationship and that becomes a rape? To me, what I think age of consent is about is really, and I've said this before on the show, it's not a new take. I think what it's really about is artificially increasing the sexual marketplace value of older women.
Of course, that's where he was going to go with it. Well, number one is wanting to have sex with younger girls. Number two is women bad, women value.
Yeah, so in order to get people to have sex with older women and to make them seem more valuable, we're going to make girls under 18 off limits. We're going to make them off limits so that people have no choice but to go for older women. We're increasing,
which doesn't make any sense. So, but for those who don't know who Daniel Hakikachu is, and you think we're probably lying, I'm probably lying about this. Here is Daniel Hakikachu saying exactly what the fuck I'm talking about.
When there are signs of physical maturity, it becomes permissible for the husband in Islamic law to have marital relationships or consummate the relation with his...
Consummate means sex.
Bride, and this is the example of the
child
Prophet,
bride.
peace be upon him.
You know what precocious puberty is?
Starting puberty unusually early.
Is there anything in Islam that prevents you from, a man marrying a 5-year-old that started precocious puberty?
You can arrange a marriage even as an infant, but that doesn't mean that sex is allowed.
Could a man have a marriage to a 5-year-old consummated if she started precocious puberty?
If she starts showing signs of physical maturity, then yes, that's permissible. As I
said,
said,
age 4?
If there are signs
3.
of, so this is something that becomes biologically impossible because
I have a
puberty,
study
there are
that shows
no,
it goes as early as 11 months.
Well, that's something that the parents would not, see, the thing about Islamic marriage is that parents are involved at these ages, and when you...
And it's perfectly fine because, if the parents say, oh, this grown man who is 50, 60, 70, 40, 30, doesn't matter so long as he has some form of money that can compensate the fact that I'm handing over my 11-month-old or my 1-year-old or my 2-year-old or my 3-year-old over for him to marry and to have sex with when he feels the need or he sees that there is some form of maturity to have sex with a little girl, that is perfectly fine. Again, Rev, listen to me, my brother in Christ. All right. That's a phrase from the almighty Lolly. My brother in Christ. You really need to differentiate yourself from that. It's the same thing as a black person saying, well, honestly, I do believe black lives honestly matter. You know? To some people, they'll say, oh, well, yeah, I mean, yeah, you're right. You know, I think all lives matter, but, right, black lives actually do matter. But then some people will go, are you aware of what happened in the summer of love 2020? Are you aware of what happened in Chaz Chop? Are you aware of what happened with Black Hammer, where the leader was collectivizing young black boys and sexually assaulting them in a mansion where he was living in a predominantly white area and sexually assaulting the young boys to pay the rent for them to actually stay there, only to end up getting caught and then shooting himself to avoid accountability from the police officers? It is a politically loaded phrase. In some instances, some people don't know the political history behind a phrase such as Black Lives Matter or Crisis King. But how they are approached in terms of that phrase often conditions them to accept very extremist views because they've been punched or they felt attacked online because of a political phrase that they don't normally understand. It's like say for instance, like this is a gauge, right, of Crisis King. On the left, it's actual Christian value. On the right, it's more extremist Christian value. And depending on how you attack that person, that gauge goes over here slowly, more and more and more and more and more and more to extreme religious values, to where they can then justify why it is perfectly fine for them to adopt these extremist values of why minorities need to be oppressed and how white people need to rule all the institutions and how we need to control the free market and that the market ultimately needs to be controlled, or we need to genocide the Jews, and so on and so forth. But if you can deconstruct the phrase Christ is King and ultimately claim your statement saying that we're not saying you can't say Christ is King. No one is saying that. No one is saying Christ is King is purely an anti-Semitic position. No one is saying that. But it does have a history of people like Nick Fuentes, Candace Owens, using the phrase to attack Jews in a very veiled manner, to where when you point them out and say, hey, why are you constantly referring to Jews in a very negative manner? They go, what? No, we're not attacking the Jews. We're not attacking the Jews in a very critical racist manner. We're just asking questions. Are you saying we can't ask the questions on why the Holocaust never really happened? Because, Nick Fuentes fucking, cookies analogy to refer to the Jews to basically say that, the Holocaust never happened because the amount of Jews being burnt per day does not make any sense. Again, Rev, I'm going to keep repeating this over and over and over because I feel like someone's going to take me out of context. I am not saying you're a neo-Nazi. I am not saying you're a Jew. I've been misspoken there. I am not saying you're a white supremacist. I am not saying you're a pedophile. The context of this video is to inform you of the politically loaded history of this phrase. There's two types of ways. There's the ahistorical history of Christianity, where you need, if you're going to be a Christian, you need to study in forms of theology to get a better understanding. And then there's the far right extremist personal interpretation of what it means to be a Christian, and that their interpretation is nothing more than a form to impose that they're God, or they're the God's chosen people. And because that they're God's chosen people, they use the Bible to justify that anyone who isn't white or appears to be white or have white blood, pure Aryan blood, will be the slaves of the Aryan race and enter a 1,000-year Reich. You really do need to be careful with this. Doesn't every U.S. state have their own age? Yeah, every U.S. state has their own age of consent. Some states are purely 18, some are 17, some are 16. Isn't an apostate prophet critical of Islam? Yeah, but he's a former Islamic. The reason why he's critical of it is because he came from it. He came purely from Islam, so he ultimately understands what Islam is in terms of the Quran and the Hadiths, right? And then there's another thing I want to point out here. So here's a post on Twitter of some guy named Lux Silver Surfer Defender, where he says, with the whole thing with Rev saying, no, Christ is king. You are a fake ass Christian. I am sorry. And then Rev's response is, come on, which is kind of funny considering the person that's calling this person a fake Christian is a goth, pagan, Marxist, Leninist, gender, sex abolitionist, dungeon master taken. I don't know what the fuck that I seriously hate Twitter, to be honest. I fucking hate Twitter sometimes, but hey, you know, when it comes to a criminal, that's what I like about criminals. They'll tell you exactly what type of person they are. But in terms of understanding political subversiveness, in terms of like someone like Antonio Gramsci, who also said, you know, I think back in those days, he said like Christianity had some solutions, but at the same time, it still upheld the status quo of the bourgeois. So in terms of Anthony Gramsci's interpretation of Christianity, it needed to be subverted. So just because he's a leftist does not automatically vindicate Rev. Because you need to understand, if Rev is using Christ as king as a shield, as a religious shield to beat criticism back, as a means to implement political subversion to implement National Socialism, this is just a case of the pot calling the kettle black, because that would imply if Rev, I'm saying again, if Rev is adopting Christian nationalism in terms of the form of implementing white nationalism. If that is the case, this is just a case of the pot calling the kettle black. But the problem is a lot of people in the anti-woke space does not understand political ideologies. They don't understand ideological philosophy of Marxism, or they don't understand Karl Marx, or they don't understand Antonio Gramsci, or they don't understand Mussolini, or they don't understand Mao or Pol Pot or Hitler or Stalin or Fidel Castro, or I forgot that one motherfucker in South Africa where he's like kill the Boers, which is just basically kill the white farmers. They're all of the same cult, just packaged differently. And that's if, I keep reiterating this because I don't want to be taken out of context, that's if Rev is using Christ as king as nothing more than a political shield to protect white nationalism and to protect the implementation of National Socialism. That's if. If he's an actual Christian, then yes. if he's an actual Christian, if he believes that the Jews are his allies and that he's an ally of the Jew, and that he believes that the Jews and Zionism has a right to exist and Israel has a right to exist, then that would make this person a hypocrite, and that would actually vindicate them. Again, it's very nuanced. It's very nuanced. I'm trying to really, really explain here. I'm going to keep saying this over and over and over. I am not saying revsaysdesu, his wife, I'm not saying they're a neo-Nazi. I'm not saying they're white supremacists. I'm not saying they're racists. And I'm not saying they're pedophiles. But the thing you need to understand is this, and I forgot that quote from Hitler, where it's something along the lines of a group of people will not under no circumstances believe that their leader can do evil so long as they have a tally of things that says that this person is good. It's kind of like that whole thing with Hacks, who ended up dying from his complications from him attempting to take his life. And Hacks is a Smash player who, in the FGC space, they ended up taking away his livelihood and everything that he lived for in terms of being a Smash player. And because they isolated him and put him in a box, he attempted to take his life. But it didn't go through all the way. He ended up losing a leg. But because he lost that leg, and because of the and because of the other health complications that came from him trying to take his life, he ended up dying because of those complications. And the sick part is that those people who did that to him went to his funeral and started talking about how good of a person Hacks was. This is political subversion. That is a form of political subversiveness. And I'm saying it again, like, Rev, you really do need to clarify what you mean when you say Christ is King. You really do need to clarify a historical, theological information of Christianity, and not this information of Christianity that you find like on Twitter or some type of YouTube. You really do need to be careful, because one tilt to the right is enough for everybody to start questioning you in the thinking that you are a neo-Nazi, you are a white supremacist, you are trying to lower the age of consent, you are a pedophile. You do need to be careful with that. You really do need to be careful with it. And this is a video clip of like within the Quran that actually shows, like, just in case someone's saying, well, how is it true that the Jews and the Christians are allies? Well, here it is in the Quran, right, from Apostate Prophet's channel. Here it says in the Quran, O you who have believed, do not take the Jews and the Christians as allies. They are in fact allies of one another. It's saying those who are of Allah, of Islam, do not take Christians or Jews as allies, for they are allies of one another, because they are not devoted to God, the God of Allah. They're devoted to the God of Jesus Christ, the Son of God, Jehovah Jireh. That they are in fact allies of one another. And whoever is an ally to them, as in a person who is an ally to Christians and Jews, among you, of those who follow Allah, then indeed he is one of them. Which means even if you follow Allah, you cannot under no circumstances follow or have a Christian or a Jew as an ally. This is ahistorical information. This is from the Quran. Indeed, Allah guides not the wrongdoing people. And to step outside of the tenets of Allah would make you a wrongdoer, because that means you are forsaking Allah and you're taking in Jesus Christ. Like, there's a lot, like, you need to really be careful when you're making claims like that, especially with a politically loaded phrase. Like, you really do need to be careful about that. And then, and I posted that information right here, and I hope it kind of like takes off. And I'm making it abundantly clear. I'm saying, I'm giving you room to state your position clearly. Christ is King is a politically loaded phrase that usually ties back to the death to the Jews. You really need to clarify this. Considering you're rediscovering faith, I will give you the benefit of the doubt. I have to cut it short because I'm not paying Twitter just to be able to type paragraph. Okay? So, yeah. And then there's like other information. I'm thinking this comment right here is actually talking about the person that's like pointing towards Dev, not Dev himself. Isn't that the guy that lied about one of his local priests being a creep on Twitter? Cloud, I know someone has the screenshot. Apparently this is something the almighty Lolly talked about. And then this is a really good argument right here. Most of your content is just defending porn, lolly hentai, and other lewd imagery from censorship. Now you're taking the side of Christians who keep wanting to censor that stuff, and he's against porn and masturbation. Like, pick a lane. And that's actually a legitimate criticism, Rev. Because you have gone out your way making videos talking about like right-wing extremists or like right-wing Puritans such as like Razor Fist and Melanie Mack and what's that one motherfucker? Not Mike Winger. I forgot that dude's name. It's that guy that was on a live stream debating. I think he was debating Destiny, and he literally was like taking a piss live on stream. And that guy's kind of you have been talking about these people, so it's kind of weird that you're leading off with this political phrase, Christ is King, which is heavily bloated with a lot of anti-Semitic, anti-Christian views while posing to be a Christian. While at the exact same time, you've been posting videos about right-wing Puritans and how they just want to invade the culture and change and kick out the cultural identity and to reform it or to reshape it in the form of their cultural identity. So that is a legitimate criticism. That is a legitimate criticism. So honestly, I would say you really do need to come out with a video. I'm going to give you the benefit of the doubt. You need to come out with a video explaining your position on what it means to you to truly be a Christian and what it means to, like, honestly truly be a Christian and not fall into the trap of being a quote unquote Christian carrying the waters of National Socialism, aka National Christianity, because that's what that is in terms of political subversion. And I'm not saying like Christians under no circumstances can't be part of the government, because there's a difference between God and the state versus a person who believes in God and is running in the state, you know, because you can be a Christian that has godly values, but at the same time, you value statistics more than using the Bible and the scriptures as a form of authority to push policies and legislations based on the Bible, which would then take away certain freedoms and rights within this country. And I'm not talking about in terms of far left political ideas of LGBTQ and stuff like that. I'm talking about in terms of natural rights and natural freedom that our forefathers fought hard to implement and is currently being under attack under the guise of Christian beliefs. And you really do need, like, I'm really giving you that room to be like, hey, no, here's my video on honestly what I believe in Christianity. And to be honest, you don't need to come out with it now, considering, again, you don't know much about Christianity, which is fair. So at least understand at a theological sense what is Christianity, what it means to truly be a Christian, what it means to truly be a follower of God. Because in the Bible, Jesus didn't go around spreading the word through the Roman Empire. He spread the word on foot, village to village, town to town, on foot, trying to spread the word of God to people who didn't believe, people who were willing to listen. He was willing to be scrutinized and brutalized. Well, he wasn't willing to be brutalized because they also believed in self-defense. That's why the 12 disciples went around with short swords. So they honestly did believe in self-defense. So don't listen to a person that says turn the other cheek. That's a person that believes in that brainwashed bullshit. When it says turn the other cheek, they don't mean turn the other cheek and let them slap you that way, just like how they slap you this way. It means when a person slaps your cheek, you turn their cheek with your hand slapping their ass back. That's what it actually fucking means. So yeah, that's a big major misinterpretation that is often being spread within the political zeitgeist of online. So again, I want to make this abundantly clear. I am not saying revsaysdesu and his wife, I am not saying they are neo-Nazis. I am not saying they are white supremacists. I am not saying they cannot be Christians. I am not saying they cannot say Christ is king. I am making that abundantly clear. The point of this video, the point of this live stream, is to show that there is political underlying of a political history, that this phrase is often used in anti-Semitic viewpoints to express anti-Semitic hatred towards Jews, because both sides do have a hatred for Jews. Both sides clearly have a hatred for capitalism. And both sides are expressing some form of hatred for Jews and some form of hatred of capitalism. But that doesn't mean every person who has a critique of the Israel government sides with these people, because, you know, like my friend Fabian Liberty, you know, he's an anarcho-capitalist, so am I. We don't have a position against, well, he doesn't have a position against Israel simply because, you know, it has a state, so therefore it has to be the government. He's purely against any type of wrongdoing that the government does, because governments are often capable of wrongdoings. So it's not as black and white. It's really nuanced. It's really shades of gray. The reason why, despite the fact that I'm an anarcho-capitalist and I consider myself an ally of Israel, is because my religious belief supersedes my political beliefs, despite the fact that I am anarcho-capitalist. So it's something you really, I am really trying to employ to be careful with how you put a huge target on your back. And the second you deviate from the second you deviate from real Christian values to fake Christian values, that's it. You are slowly, you're blurring that line. And that line is so blurred to the point you start to look like you're over here when in actuality you're over here. Well, you think you're over here. And the more you keep getting attacked because based off your beliefs, you're going to start slowly inching your way over here in order for you to feel the need to be able to express your political beliefs. And to be honest, no one's saying that you cannot, under no circumstances, express your political beliefs. However, what I would honestly advocate for you to do, if you honestly are interested in Christianity, one, do not take it online. You are fresh. You are a freshman. Have no understanding of what the hell you're jumping into. Two, do it in a local manner with your participating church, with your churches within your community. If you are truly interested in Christianity, I would honestly form some form of relationship with a church within your community where you can have a relationship with your pastor and your community, and you can strengthen your understanding and belief within your Christian values in a more reality sense rather than a more digital online sense, which is clouded with anti-Semitic worldview. And you don't want to mix those up. You don't want to get mixed up into the idea of of nationalism. And nationalism is a very broad term because it also means like you just love America, you know? Like any person who is born in America is an American. Or you can mistakenly take on the idea of nationalism in terms of only white, Anglo-Saxon, Nordic, white people are Americans. Anyone who is born here and anyone who is born here who is not of these blood types in terms of what it means to be a true American. American first, American Aryan blood and soil. That person is not American, that person is a serf. Really do need to be careful with it, because it's very messy. It's very messy. And one misstep is enough for a person to screenshot what you said or to clip what you said and spread it as saying, see, he is a pedophile, he is a neo-Nazi, he is a white supremacist. We've been right this entire time. Really need to be careful. You really need to be careful. So, yeah, that's pretty much all I really wanted to talk about. Please, for the love of God, like, share this around. And I seriously doubt Rev's gonna watch this, but if he does, hey, what's up, buddy? I've been following you for quite some time. I would say ever since like 2021. You've been doing good. You've been doing pretty good on your content. On this one, in terms of what you said on Twitter, you really do need to be careful. Because Christ is King is a very politically loaded. It's politically loaded and it's ahistorically loaded with a lot of things, that to the point to where if you get it wrong and you start adopting something that you think is Christian, but it's actually National Socialist, actually white ethno-nationalist under the guise of Christian national. Everything that you have been saying for the past 4 years, 5 years, 6, 7, ever since you had your YouTube channel, is immediately slander, is immediately discredit off of 3 fucking minutes. You really need to be careful. And that's pretty much all I wanted to say. So, like, leave a comment at the bottom. Like, dislike. If you like it, tell me why you like it. If you dislike it, why you dislike it. Peace be with you, brother in Christ. And I will catch you guys later. And be safe out there.